everybody, and welcome to our application tips and strategy session here at Columbia Climate School. This is personally my favorite info session to host. It features all of our current students, and I think that we dive deep into the application process and give some really strong advice and words of wisdom from the current student learning community. So I hope you guys all enjoy this session. I always do the same thing at the start of my virtual sessions. I love to see kind of the diverse nature of our prospective student audience and learn where everybody is joining us from. And it's also my opportunity to shamelessly double check the audio. So if everybody joining us could type in the Q&A section, because we have the chat disabled, but if you type in the Q&A section, the city and the state with which you're joining us from, or the city and the country with which you're joining us from, we would love to see it. So feel free to start typing away. I love them when they're coming in. Paris, France, welcome. Madrid, Marina, you made it. I'm so glad you're here. Seattle, Washington, welcome. Vancouver, we love Vancouver. Jefferson Township in Morris County, New Jersey. Awesome, Mo. I just moved to Jersey. Love New Jersey. Hello from Taipei. Welcome, welcome. Rochester, New York. Detroit, Michigan. I love Detroit as well, Olivia. You guys have some of the best food. San Francisco, California, welcome. One of our students on the panel is a native Californian. Buckle up, it's exciting. Lahore, Pakistan, welcome. India, thank you so much, Curdy, for attending. Welcome, welcome. Any more? I genuinely do love to see the locations roll in. And Bogota, Colombia, welcome. I'm so glad, Philippe, I'm glad you're able to make it. I was waiting for that one more from South America. So that's brilliant. We're really rounding out the session today. And Laura from New York City, welcome, New York. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Again, my name is Alfred Ayub. And today we are going to be deep diving into our application tips and strategy session. I think the real heart of this session specifically is our current students kind of sharing their words of wisdom and how they approached the application process last year. And this is also an excellent opportunity for you as prospective students to ask them questions about how they approach the application. So with that said, and the spirit of the application tips and strategy, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to first introduce our panelists. I will then break down the application components and specifically discuss holistic admissions and what holistic admissions means. We'll also talk a little bit more about transcripts, our transcripts policy, also transcripts as it relates to international students. We'll also touch on standardized test scores, especially for international students where English was not your first language, so we'll be touching on that. We will also deep dive into letters of recommendation and our policy surrounding letters of recommendation. And then finally, the statement of purpose, which I would argue is one of the most critical pieces of your application when applying to Columbia Climate School. And then we will conclude with our question and answer specifically for our panelists. But without further ado, I would like to now introduce our panelists. And why don't I do this? I'll change it up a little. Let's go ahead and start with Gabby Medina. Gabby, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your academic background and your professional background prior to matriculating to Columbia Climate School?
This is me doing my audio check. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. My name's Gabby Medina. I'm from the Bay Area originally, but I moved to San Diego and I lived there for about 7 years before moving to New York. And I went to SDSU, did my undergrad there under sustainability for a BA, and then I double minored in political science and geological science. So always really interested in the interconnection of humans and our social systems, but also natural earth systems as well, and the interplay of climate change as a multiplier on the vulnerability and equity scale as well. And so I worked in the nonprofit sector with local government in the San Diego region on climate action plans, various, energy regulations through California down to the local level, and kind of how to implement projects around policy. And then I went to the private sector, to the clean tech space, That was interesting. I would love to talk if anyone's interested in talking about the ESG sector. I would love to. But then I needed kind of a reboot, and I really asked myself where I wanted to fit into the climate space. To do work I was passionate about, but also I had always wanted to get a master's degree, and as a first generation student, do that for myself and my family, and all the jobs that I was looking for really required a master's. So I looked at programs, got into one in California, Scripps Institute of Oceanography. So that would have been a little more ocean science focused, I think, but the interdisciplinary nature of Columbia, and also, the prestige of this program and everyone who is in it as well, just really caught my eye. Got to meet the faculty and admin before getting officially putting down my deposit and everything, and I would never do it different. So yeah, thank you, Alfred.
Excellent. Thank you, Gabby. And next up, why don't we go with Rishabh? Rishabh Jain, could you introduce yourself and give us a little more background on your education and professional roles?
Sure, thanks, Alfred. So morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. My name is Rishabh Jain. I am originally from Memphis, Tennessee, so the southeastern United States. And I went to my undergraduate degree at Georgia Tech, the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta. Graduated from there about 3 years ago. And in that time, we did a few different internships, one on Capitol Hill at the US Capitol building with the House of Representatives, and then one with the US Department of Energy out in Denver, Colorado. My most recent professional experience before coming to Columbia Climate School was with a small consulting company called Clark Street Associates. Essentially, my role was helping small to medium-sized climate technology, green technology, clean tech manufacturers get government funding through the most recent funding vehicles out of the federal government. So that I finished up May of this past year. Had always been eyeing a graduate program, particularly one that focused on climate, a just transition, renewable energy, the policy and those mechanisms as well. Discovered the Columbia Climate School late last year, about around this time or a little before this time last year. And the rest, as they say, is history. Applied and now I'm here studying kind of a jack of all trades. So I like a lot of the renewable energy policy, climate policy, but then also the financial aspects, renewable energy project finance, climate finance, and then also taking a look at the sort of technical aspects of climate change and the scientific aspects of it as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Rishabh. And Chasing Rotich, Chex, can we go ahead and transition to you? Introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alfred. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I can see that most people that we've had one-on-ones with have also joined the call, so it's really good to see you. My name is Chesang Rotich. I am born and raised in Kenya. I have a Bachelor's of Technology from the Technical University of Kenya, that is in Nairobi. And that is where I spent the last 10 years. So I graduated in 2017, December, and after that I went into ENS work consultancy and had a short stint doing ESG and impact. And I think that's what tailored my choice in climate, the course that we are doing right now. So during that process, I got interested in renewable energy finance. And so when I was looking for a course, and like in the late 2022, I was like trying to find a school, and I think I came across Columbia early 2023. And yeah, I looked at the courses they offer and my interest area, and they kind of ticked the box. So that's when I, started out the application process, try to reach out to people and try to match that match my interest. So yeah, and I think the experience so far has been great. So I think we can dive deeper into the details of my process coming here later in the question session. And so yeah, good to see you all.
Thank you, Chesang. And then finally, last but absolutely not least, is Peyton Hernandez. Peyton, can you introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your education background and motivations for climate?
Yeah, of course. I'm Peyton. I just graduated from the University of Florida in May, so I came straight from undergrad and applied while I was still in school. I studied sustainability. Oh, also I'm from Tampa, Florida. We love to shout that out, me and Alfred. But Yeah, I studied sustainability in undergrad with some environmental justice and event management minors. So that was my main focus, but I always knew I wanted to go to grad school just to dive deeper, get some more practical experience. Um, I worked at nonprofits in Florida, Tampa Bay Watch Discovery Center, so on the St. Petersburg Pier in Tampa, doing environmental education. And then I also did outreach for Alachua County or Alachua Conservation Trust, so a land trust organization. So a little bit all over the place. And then I also did a program with B Corps in my undergrad. Did some consulting for a coffee company that uses solar energy, which is really awesome. So kind of a little all over the place, but I really wanted to go to grad school to just hone my focus and see where I wanted to take this. And I really am currently exploring working in the sports and events industry, so using that minor and combining it with my major from undergrad. And I'm really excited about everything the climate school has been able to offer so far, and it's just a really great community. And I just knew I wanted to continue my learning, so that's how I ended up here.
Excellent. Thank you, Peyton. Thank you, all of our panelists. So now I'm going to go ahead and transition into specifically discussing the application process and each component of the application process. During the session, though, if questions do come up, feel free to type the questions into the Q&A. We are going to transition back to our panelists, and I have some broad kind of opening panel discussion questions that I'll begin with, but then we will be deep diving into the Q&A section as well. So feel free, if you do have questions, submit those through the Q&A button. So let's first review and discuss the admissions process. So one thing I want to say what it's not, it is not a formula. It is not X GPA times Y standardized test score equals up or down decision. It is very much a holistic review process. And what do I mean by holistic review process? That means every single component of your application is carefully reviewed and assessed. Our admissions committee is looking at your academic ability. They're also looking at your commitment to climate change, your fit within the graduate program of choice, whether it's the MA in Climate and Society or alternatively the MS in Climate. And this point, I do want to note, you can only submit a single application to Columbia Climate School per fall intake. So you will have to select whether it is the MA in Climate and Society or alternatively the MS in Climate program that you are deciding to choose. And then the other major component, and I certainly have said this during many one-on-ones and many different virtual info sessions, but it's worth emphasizing again, the admissions committee is looking for your potential contributions to the learning community and gains from the program. Your X factor as a candidate is certainly going to be, what are you bringing to the table as a student when you're sitting in the classroom? When you raise your hand and you have a comment or you have a thought or you have a lived experience to share, is everybody going to be elevated as a result of it? So again, potential contributions to the learning community is a huge aspect of the admissions review process as well. In terms of the application components, of course, we have an online application. In that online application, you're submitting the form. You'll be uploading a resume, transcripts, which we'll deep dive into, 2 letters of recommendation, which we will also have a further discussion on, your statement of purpose, which is a critical component. We are going to touch on that as well. And then a standardized test score is required for students where the first language is not English, and it's also not the language of instruction in your undergraduate university. So that would be the TOEFL, the IELTS, or alternatively the Duolingo English test. We will be discussing that further. And then finally, an optional component would be the GRE. So if you are applying to the MS in Climate, candidates with less quantitative degree backgrounds are encouraged to submit it, but I want to just emphasize the GRE is not required of either program. It's not a required component for admissions review. So I wanted to also emphasize that. Now let's go a little bit further and touch on the application deadline. So first and foremost, today is December 12th, 2024. I highly, highly recommend all of you joining us today to take advantage of our priority deadline, which is January 15th, 2025. Why? Because decisions will be released in March, and it's also highly, highly recommended for climate school merit-based scholarships. So if you are interested in merit-based funding, you absolutely should apply by the January 15th, 2025 deadline. And that gives you more time for planning. You'll get admitted sooner, you'll get that admissions decision sooner, and it just gives you additional time to weigh your options. And then if you needed additional time, if you don't think you can apply by the January 15th deadline, our final deadline, which is very much still available, would be March 1st, 2025. So again, January 15th is priority deadline. March 1st is final deadline. Many students will ask me, is January 15th binding? Does that mean if I'm admitted, I have to attend? No, this is not a binding decision. Priority deadline is simply giving you a decision sooner and also enhancing your chances of receiving a merit-based scholarship. So now I'm going to deep dive into each section that we briefly listed earlier. First, let's talk about transcripts. So number one, in order to receive an admissions decision, we simply need the unofficial college transcript from every post-secondary institution attended. Again, I want to stress it's an unofficial college transcript. We do not need official college transcripts electronically sent to us. If you have unofficial college transcripts on hand, you would simply upload those documents as PDFs into the online application system. But there is nuances around the transcripts that we have to emphasize as well. When you are uploading your transcripts, the transcripts absolutely must show the course titles. They must show the grades received. The transcript also has to display the duration of study, and they also have to display the degree or diploma that you have received. So again, an unofficial transcript cannot simply be you as a candidate typing in a Word document what courses and where you attended. These are documents that are rendered by your university. They are unofficial because you have them in hand. So again, the transcript must show you the course titles, the grades received, the duration of study, and the degree or diploma received if applicable. Something else it needs to show is the school with which the university title should also be on the transcript as well. Do not list schools that are not colleges or universities. We've seen this occasionally where, let's say, a student took a course for non-credit through Coursera, and they decide to list that in their education section. That would then trigger a component of the missing or the application checklist for you to upload that, and that's not a necessary document. So do not list any schools that are not colleges or universities, and also do not list information for study at a high school or other secondary school. So we are not interested in you listing the high school with which you attended in our admissions application either. Some additional elements of transcripts to think about is when you are an admitted student, you will be then required to submit and provide your official transcripts, okay? So while we are rendering decisions with unofficial transcripts, if you are admitted and decide to enroll in our university, you would then need to submit the official transcripts, okay? And then also translations if applicable for verification. So I'll go into that shortly as well when we talk about WES. But one thing I want to note, there is no minimum GPA requirements for admission to Columbia Climate School. I want to emphasize that over and over again. Have we admitted students with 2.8 GPAs? Yes. Have we rejected students with 3.8 GPAs? Yes. It's not about a GPA to gain admission to this program. As I stressed earlier, it's a holistic review process. Another element to consider is for current students. So if you are a current university student, we want you to upload transcripts with grades from the preceding term. So if you are currently enrolled in university, feel free to upload your most recent transcripts, but make sure it has the most recent preceding term on it. And I don't recommend actually waiting for your fall grades. It is preferable if in-progress grades are listed on the transcript, but don't feel like you have to wait for your fall grades to upload the transcript. So again, for the audience of students right now, let's say you're a senior at the University of Central Florida, which is where I went for undergrad. And you currently are applying to Columbia Climate School. You're not graduating until May. Feel free to upload your unofficial transcripts, which will show the fall grades with in-progress coursework. Don't feel like you have to wait to submit the transcript with the current fall grades. And again, ask a question if that didn't necessarily make sense. I hope it did. So now going into international transcripts, okay? Academic records not in English must be accompanied by a certified English translation. So if you attended a university where the transcript is in, let's say, Arabic, we would need that transcript in a certified English translation in order for our admissions committee to review that transcript. Translations must be literal and complete versions of the original. And you would, again, upload the transcript with the accompanying translation. So we would want to see both the unofficial transcript in Arabic, but we would also want to see the certified translation uploaded together. Now, this is the key point, and Chesan can maybe speak a little bit more to her experience on the panel later, but if admitted, and you're an international student with an international transcript, we would require a WES evaluation for institutions outside the United States. So specific instructions will be provided for the for electronic submission of official transcripts after you've been accepted. But again, what I want to stress is the WES evaluation is not important now as an applicant, but the WES evaluation becomes critical after you've been admitted and you've decided to enroll in Columbia Climate School. You will have to submit a WES evaluation again for any institutions outside of the United States. So now let's talk a little bit more about standardized tests. A TOEFL, IELTS, or a Duolingo English test. So we're offering 3 options for English language tests. Those are required if one of the following criteria: first language is not English, and the bachelor's degree is from an institution where English is not the primary language of instruction. So, for example, let's say your first language is Arabic and you studied Arabic throughout your education, but when you ended up going to university, you ended up going to the University of Florida to receive your bachelor's degree. Well, the University of Florida, the language of instruction is English. So therefore, you would not need a TOEFL or IELTS score. But let's say that you actually went to a university where Arabic was the language of instruction and is your first language, then we would need a TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo English test. So again, to get the English language waiver, it would be if your undergraduate degree is from an institution where the language of instruction is English. Scores must be from within 2 years of the application deadline, and official scores must be received by the application deadline. So I'm just giving a highlight there. When you are taking the TOEFL, that seems to be our most popular test, although we don't have a preferred test. The TOEFL score code is D114. And again, these English language tests, if you are required to submit a test score, they have to be taken within 2 years of the application deadline. Minimum scores, it's a 100 on the TOEFL internet-based test, a 7.5 on the IELTS, and finally a 135 on the Duolingo English test. Again, we don't need all 3 tests, we only need 1 test. Now for letters of recommendation. These are just general guiding principles, but one thing we always need to stress is choose people who know you well and interact with you in different capacities. Refrain from asking relatives, family, or personal friends and classmates. Ideally, letters should address both your academic abilities and experience and potential in the climate space. Another nuance I should stress here is if you attended school in the past 5 years, one of your recommenders must be from your academic career. So again, if you let's say graduated from university 2 years ago, then one of the recommendation letters should be an academic recommendation letter. When approaching recommenders, ask if they have time to write a strong letter of recommendation, and I can't emphasize that enough. You're asking them for a strong letter of recommendation. And another element to really stress is provide an overview of the program of interest. Recommendation letters must be written in English or translated into English, and all letters must be submitted directly using our application system generated link. So how it works is you're going to provide the name and email address of your recommender along with their title and additional information we'll be asking. And then the recommender is going to get an email from Columbia Climate School's application system with a secure link. The recommender will have to use that secure link to upload the letter of recommendation. We will not accept the letter of recommendation mailed to us. We will not accept the letter of recommendation emailed to us. the recommender has to use that secure link to upload the recommendation letter. I want to just say, go back and say, when you're asking recommenders for a letter of recommendation, I oftentimes say, hey, take them out for a coffee, have a Zoom meeting with them, but really dive into what your motivations and goals are for graduate school. You can even go as far as to share your statement of purpose with them, just to hear your narrative and voice regarding this specific program at Columbia Climate School, for example. That can also be helpful. But again, bearing in mind, we recognize also you're going to be applying to multiple graduate schools, but you really want to make sure your recommender understands your motivations for Columbia Climate School. I promise you'll get a stronger recommendation letter by doing that. Some continued elements of the letters of recommendation. You will be asked whether or not you waive your right to access your letter of recommendation. Okay, so you're going to be asked in the application system whether or not you waive your right to access the letter of recommendation. Many students get confused by this, so I want to just make it very clear. If you waive your right, again, if you select waiving your right, you will not be able to view the letters of recommendation submitted, even if you are admitted and enroll in the university. So again, if you waive your right and you ultimately do matriculate to Columbia Climate School, the letter of recommendation is not viewable for you. It's not a part of your student record. If you do not waive your right, your letters will become part of your student record, and you will have the right to inspect that record, including your letters, if you're admitted and choose to enroll in Columbia Climate School. Your decision cannot be reversed once you make this selection. Why am I emphasizing this right now? Why this slide in particular? Why this discussion about waiving your right or not waiving your right? Well, this could be a sensitive topic for your recommenders in particular. You might be going to a professor, and they might only write recommendation letters for candidates who agree to waive their right to review the letter of recommendation. You want to make sure that if you are not waiving the right, that your recommenders know that you're not waiving the right, because the recommenders will get a notification when they are asked to write a recommendation letter for you, and they will be notified whether you waived your right to review the letter or did not waive the right. So just make sure that if you're deciding not to waive your right, make sure that your recommenders are also comfortable with that aspect. Another question that comes up among applicants, they will frequently ask me, Alfred, does it matter? Does the admissions committee make a decision? Is it part of their evaluation process of whether or not I waived the right for the application? It is not. The admissions committee is not evaluating candidates differently, whether you waive the right or do not waive the right. Okay, so I want to emphasize that matter as well. But again, your decision cannot be reversed once you make that selection. In terms of the MA Climate and Society Statement of Purpose, I just want to now jump into that because this is an important component. We want you, this is up to 1,000 words. Please share the key experiences that have contributed to your commitment to work on climate change issues. In addition, what are your academic and professional goals, and what knowledge and skills are you hoping to develop through enrollment in Columbia Climate School? And finally, why is enrollment in Climate and Society critical in helping you achieve your goals, and which Climate and Society core course are you most excited to complete? That's a long statement of purpose prompt, but the components in it are critical. I can't emphasize them enough. Think of your application as a painting, and the statement of purpose is framing out that painting. It answers a lot of question marks surrounding your candidacy for the admissions committee, and it really allows the admissions committee to understand the why this program is critical for you to enroll in. An element of the statement of purpose that I do want to really touch on and just shine a light on is, Columbia Climate School is a very mission-driven institution. These programs are phenomenal. I'm not doing a deep dive of the programs because the spirit of this session is really to just touch on our application requirements, but the Climate Core is a very important blueprint piece of your Columbia Climate School education. And it's going to be challenging and it's going to be rigorous. That's the only reason why you're interested in coming to Columbia. You're interested in the challenge. You're interested in being challenged. We do want you to reflect on the climate core. Okay, so that component of the statement of purpose should not be glossed over. You should be looking at the climate core. And in fact, my colleague Damaris Diaz, who is helping us today with the Q&A, Damaris, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and pasting in the chat box specifically the climate core, specifically for the MA Climate and Society webpage, landing page, and the MS in Climate. I think it's always helpful for students to reflect on the climate core. So climate core courses include adaptation, climate change mitigation, climate justice, dynamics. These are the climate core. So definitely review them and reflect on which climate core course most excites you. And sometimes the strongest statements of purpose weave in something even greater than the course and why it excites them, but perhaps a specific narrative within their own motivations for climate and how that course matches with it. In terms of the MS in Climate statement of purpose, it's remarkably similar. So please share the key experiences that have contributed to your commitment to work on climate change issues. What academic and professional goals and what knowledge and skills are you hoping to develop through enrollment in Columbia Climate School? Again, which climate core course are you most excited to complete? But finally, please detail which advanced certificate you're most interested in pursuing and why as well. So again, the advanced certificate is also an important component when writing the MS in Climate statement of purpose. Bearing in mind, this is a 21-month program, 50 credit hours in the MS in Climate. 18 of the credits are going to be made up of an advanced certificate like climate systems analytics, climate and disaster management, or climate and food systems. When you're applying to the MS in Climate, you are going to be asked which advanced certificate you're most interested in, and then the statement of purpose of prompt is asking you also to reflect on that advanced certificate. So you'll be reflecting on that. One element I just want to note is that you are actually not declaring that advanced certificate until the end of your first semester in the MS in Climate program. So I don't want you to feel like you're locking yourself into the MS in Climate Advanced Certificate at the time of admissions application, but the admissions committee will want to know which advanced certificate is of most interest to you at this time. Some additional tips for the statement of purpose, and I promised you we're about to get to the panel. Make sure this is your voice, that it comes across in your application. This is the opportunity for self-reflection, so be as authentic as possible. Describe your journey to this point. So what is your climate story? Who are you and why are you passionate about climate issues? Articulate your goals. What is your objective? How do you want to make an impact? Specifically identify a core course that appeals to you. And then those program-specific prompts, just demonstrate specifically how the MA in Climate and Society will help you achieve your goals, or alternatively, the MS in Climate. Speak in detail about the advanced certificate and why you're most interested in that advanced certificate. So for the statement of purpose, write multiple drafts, edit, and edit. I always like to stress that. When you write that statement of purpose, feel free to share it with somebody that you trust in your network, and read them after they read the statement of purpose, then read them the statement of purpose prompt and say, did I meet that prompt? Did I answer the questions in that prompt? Clearly articulate your fit for the program and application, start early and brainstorm, and then again, share your academic, professional, and personal trajectory. Now, statement of purpose don'ts. Don't copy and paste the statement of purpose for different programs. Obviously, there's going to be elements that significantly overlap with other graduate programs, but what we don't want to see is that you write a statement of purpose where you're reflecting on an entirely different program. It's unfortunate. We have seen it before. Be very cautious and careful when doing that. Also, summarize your resume. Don't do that. Your resume is an independent document already reflected, so please do not summarize your resume. Instead, you would want to reflect on important elements of your resume and expand on them in the statement of purpose, but do not simply summarize it. And then also do not write extensively about information that is explained elsewhere in your application. So now, without further ado, I want to pivot back to our panel and maybe for excitement, let's start with Rishabh. Rishabh, could you perhaps go ahead and share with us how you selected your recommenders, kind of what thought process you went into that selection, and how you approached them? And Rishabh, you might be muted. I'm so sorry.
Oh, my bad. I just found the link. Process on how I selected my recommenders. This is an interesting one because I found myself in what I guess I would call a bit of a weird gap where I was a few years out of my undergraduate degree and applying to the climate school. And so that the sort of academic recommender was one that I had to really make sure I was strongly connected with. And so what I tried to do is balance with one academic recommender and one professional recommender. So for my academic recommender, I chose a professor who I had taken a course with and really enjoyed the course content, but also enjoyed speaking with them during and after that course that I took. And that professor was, well aware of my graduate plan. And so they knew where I was going, what I planned to do with my degree. And I made sure to do kind of, as Alfred mentioned, have a chat with them and like share my resume, share other details that would help them really write a strong recommendation. For my professional recommendation letter, I chose a supervisor at an internship that I had done. And this was someone who I had a close sort of one-on-one professional connection with, someone who had seen me, work really well on the projects that had been assigned to me. And again, did a very similar process where, shared the remaining details kind of my professional and academic career, what I was doing with the program, and honestly sort of gave them a glimpse at what my statement of purpose was going to be, what I was planning on writing, such that the letter of recommendation could really complement the rest of my application, and that both of my recommenders could provide a really strong support for the remainder of my application.
Excellent, excellent. And next, how about Gabby? Gabby, what was your approach with the letters of recommendation?
So, my professional letter of recommendation was when I worked in the nonprofit space. I led one of the programs led out of USD, and it was really, we transitioned it from a professional development program to really looking at this green workforce transition and what an equitable approach to that would look like through youth engagement, through young professionals to transitioning professionals in the climate space. So we like redeveloped the whole governance and like recreated the nonprofit program. So I really got to understand that experience, and I led it, but with under his guidance. And so I felt professionally he had seen my ability to manage a process, to really, take my passion for climate and turn it into a program, and that he could speak to those skills really from like an authentic place. So I asked Everett to write my professional letter of rec. And then on the academic side, it was a professor at USD that had seen my research, been involved with it during my time at SCSU. And I really it was more of like a mentorship, but in the academic space. And I know a lot of people, I too was out of undergrad for a few years before applying to the program. So like Risha, you don't have that direct connection with professors exactly. I also finished school during COVID. So it was like double the distance that I had from professors. And that's like really understandable, when we're looking back at the pandemic and how our academic careers might have been affected during that. And so the flexibility is there as far as like the academic, but it's really like heavily they can speak to your research, they can speak to you as a student in the classroom, like being able to contribute to the group. And so I had my other professor that I worked with write me an academic letter of rec.
That's great, Gabby. Yeah, and I want to stress for any of you guys joining the call today that have 5 or more years of work experience, you don't need an academic recommendation letter. I know there's a lot of academic nuanced discussion today. Again, for any of you guys joining with 5 or more years, no need for the academic recommendation letter. So just to stress that. Now, Peyton, I'd love to hear a little bit more how you went about the process.
Yeah, so I was, as I said, in undergrad when I was applying. So I decided to go with two professors that I had close relationships with, but I definitely considered my supervisors at my internship as well, and I think that could have been just as beneficial, but um it just like what I specifically wanted to focus on in my future career was what my professors and I were working on together. So I chose one professor that I studied abroad with because traveled with him for over a month. And he got to know me and just how I am in and out of the classroom. And then my other professor, I took a class with her on sustainable business consulting, and so got to know her there and was assigned a business to be a consultant for through the class. But then I was offered an internship with that business to continue after the class, and so we kept working with my professor, getting her insight on the projects that we were working on because it was an extension of the class. So I got to keep an open line of communication with her. So um, she once again just got to see me in a more professional setting as well as in the classroom. So that's what I thought was most beneficial for me and speaking to my ability to succeed in grad school. Um, but I don't think it would have been a bad thing if just because I was an undergrad, I didn't have two professors or two academic recommenders. So
Thank you, Peyton. And then finally, Chesang, how did you approach it?
Thanks, Alfred. I think mine, having been out of school for over 5 years, it was very easy to choose just both of them be professional recommenders. But for one of my recommenders, I think they tick both boxes, both academic and professional, because this is someone who had been my course coordinator in my undergraduate program. And then we later on got to work on projects together. So he ticked both of my boxes. And so I knew he was the right person to write my recommendation because this is someone who had worked with me, knew my key strengths, and would, articulate that in the recommendation that they'd be putting in. For my second recommender, I was also very keen on someone who I had worked under or with, and this was someone who was my supervisor in one of the roles as an ESG and impact analyst. And so I knew she would speak the same. So the first thing was reach out to them. I reached out to them way earlier, even before I started my application, spoke to them, told them about my interest areas and why I want to come to Colombia. And then, I left the work to them after that. And then I would check in on them frequently to make sure they're on track. Have they submitted? Did they get the prompt? So yeah, I think my choice of recommenders was quite easy because these are people I was in touch with during my work and like frequently throughout my career. So yeah, that was my process.
Excellent. And maybe Chesang, if we can go back, let's start with you again on this next question. But when did you start working on your statement of purpose? And when did you consider it finished? How long of the process was it for you?
If we are to take starting to think about it, just brainstorming, I started way before, like literally when you look at a school and you're like, Colombia ticks my boxes and this is where I want to go. I started thinking about like, and what do I want to talk about? And then I think I started like literally writing down around August of 2023, if I'm being honest. But like after the first draft, I had a really long break, just also trying to refine. And then after that is when I sent out to my 3 reviewers. One of them was my brother. The other was my close friend who we did undergraduate together. He's my best friend. We work along in the same sector, environment, climate. And the other one was another friend who totally works in a different field and so has no clue, or rather has little clue about climate stuff. So there was a million iterations to my statement of purpose, each of them trying to make sure that I am staying on course. Am I sticking to topic? Am I answering the questions that are in the the prompt. So I think throughout the process, I got to learn that I need to be very consistent in my story, tell one story, do not be all over the place. So I had a million iterations, but I feel like it was only up until around the 10th of January, because I was submitting by priority deadline, that I felt like it is ready to send. And I don't know, and I think most of the panelists here will say, I don't know whether you really know what time it is when you know it's final, but I think there was a point that I knew it looks good. Yeah.
That's great. That's great, Chesang. And Rishabh, if you could also kind of share with us when you started and when you knew it was finished. And also, what I loved is Chesang like referenced sharing it with people. Was there anybody, Rishabh, that you also shared with it as well as you were writing your statement of purpose for reflection or feedback?
Yeah, I would say I don't think I started as early as Chesang did, because when I was working full time and also applying to graduate programs, I often kept telling myself, okay, I'll get it started. Okay, I'll get it started. And I sort of, kept telling people who would ask that I had the ideas in my head. I just had yet to write them down on a paper. And so, I think the first full draft that I felt proud of, the first draft that I felt proud of was, likely I think over the Thanksgiving break, so late November, here in the US, for a first, good draft that I really liked. And then I followed a similar process, I think, when it comes to sharing the essays. So I shared it with my brother-in-law, who has been to graduate programs, has studied in graduate school, but not in the climate space. I shared it with both of my parents, who have sort of differing viewpoints on how a statement is to be written, and then I also shared it with my sister, who I share most of my writing assignments with, because I believe her to be one of the better writers of my family and friends. And so in the same vein, I shared my document. I allowed people to add comments, to add grammar and spelling changes. And yeah, I think I would agree with Chesang on the same point, that I don't know if there ever reached a point where I looked at the document and I said, it's done, let me, set it in stone and do that. I think it reached a point where I knew I was satisfied with it. I think the people who read it were satisfied with it. And I believe I submitted my application on the day of the priority deadline, because I double and triple checked everything I could in my statement of purpose and my letters of rec and everything. And so I think the writing process does look different for everybody. So I'd say, as you all go through that, really understand how it is you write, answering the prompt and that sort of thing. But yeah, I definitely took a like write it, continue to refine it, and then submit it when I could, steps throughout that.
It's excellent, Rishabh. And Peyton, what was your approach?
I started writing it pretty much as soon as the question was available. I was very nervous because that's just me. And so I definitely spent a lot of time looking at it, but I also was obviously studying and everything and going to school. So it wasn't like I was sitting down for hours at a time working on it. I kind of had to find time here and there. So it did take me a little bit longer, as well as I was applying to other schools, obviously, figuring out what I wanted, and then doing finals and all that good stuff that a senior in undergrad does. But I think, I mean, my biggest approach was just letting shine like what I bring to the community, as well as what I wanted to get out of the program. I wouldn't say mine was like my statement of purpose didn't always flow completely. Obviously, I tried to like tie everything together and create a story, but at the same time, it's important to answer every single question that is a part of the statement. So, is the story of why I'm um interested in sustainability, plus what my experience is, plus what core course I'm most interested in, always going to be exactly connected? No, but at the same time, it's all about why I see value in the program and what I'm most proud of. So it will tie together naturally. So I think that's important to remember. I don't think you need to create like some super like what okay, I shouldn't say that. Obviously, think it out well. But I don't think it needs to be the most like
Creative writing assignment.
I don't know how to say that well, but it's
Yeah.
important to answer all of the questions.
Yeah.
That's really, really important. And so yeah, I think that was the main points I tried to hit, was just really letting why I thought this was a valuable program for me, showing it. I only had my mom read it, which not everyone will do, but going to a big state school, like I didn't really have close connections with advisors or like writing help. I kind of would have had to establish that relationship as I was starting to apply for school, so I didn't have that as readily available, and I thought that was okay. My mom just help me mostly with grammatical things, cause and just with the storytelling, like, make sure you let yourself show and what you think is most important to go into that story, like, that is up to you, what you think that we will value, what you value most, is the most important, so obviously get advice from other people, but it's most important to show what you think is important. So yes, get help with your grammar and maybe the writing style and everything like that, but, that's where I would seek the most outside help, if any. So yeah, I hope
That's
that was
brilliant.
an okay answer.
Thank you, Gabby. And I mean, I'm Peyton, and now Gabby. I'm looking at Gabby's.
I think I just froze right when after all this
It did
time.
too.
All right. So Alfred, sorry, do you want me just to touch on like who read it? Sorry, repeat the
Yeah,
question.
touch on like kind of your approach to the statement of purpose and who you
Yeah.
might have shared it with, if you shared it with somebody.
Oh my gosh, I shared it with everyone. I like made my friends who even weren't climate people, like read it. And I think that's kind of like the more you get it out, the more you get comfortable with putting that out there, and like the committee. We'll get to that, but I can talk about like who I had review it. But my approach to it, I was kind of like chess. Once I found the program, I started thinking about it. So like August, but then also like Rishabh, I was like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it later. And then October came around, and I was like, okay, I really need to start writing it. Like I've had all these ideas and different approaches, but I just need to like put it on paper. Like, let me just start somewhere. And as I was writing it, I had some of a hard time narrowing down my climate story. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach it, and I think the most grounding thing that someone told me during this process, it was a mentor, and she told me, we were talking about how to narrow the story down and what I wanted to say. And she was like, they don't know anything about you. Like they only know as much as you tell them, and any little assumptions that you have in your story and the nuances of your story, they don't know that. So is that being like, you need to have the goal of, if they walked away reading this paper, what are the 3 things you would want the committee to take away? Just like a public speaking presentation, like what are the 3 things you want the audience to take away from when you go? So I was like, okay, that was kind of like a grounding starting point. And then from knowing my values, what I wanted to show, what I wanted the committee to know about me, I was able to frame my story around that. So that was probably like the best advice that I got. And on my one-on-ones, if anyone's care, I probably have told you that regarding the essay. But yeah, and then who I wanted, I sent it my letters of rec, of course, sent it to them. I think that it's super important for them to have context on why you're applying to the program. And also, there are probably people that you're close with that work in the field, maybe. So they would be able to provide that like climate lens too. And then, yeah, like family, friends, really anyone who I was talking to and said, oh, if you ever want me to read it, you can send it over. I was like, okay, cool. So I did. It's probably about like 10 people I sent it around to. And like their feedback, some I just had them read it and let me know overall. Some I gave editing access to. And like, that's your discretion, but overall, I think it's good to get as much feedback. And then eventually I was like, okay, after 100 times of editing it, I feel great. Let me submit it. And then that's how that went.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, now what I want to do is open up for the Q&A. And in fact, then maybe I'll stop share the screen. Are there any interesting questions that came into the Q&A that we feel would be especially beneficial for the entire audience? Okay, this is interesting. What do you think your application X factor was? How do you believe you contribute to Columbia Climate School's learning community? I don't know who Anonymous is, but I love the question. Yes, I love the question. Does anybody want to say their X factor? What do you think the lens with which you brought that's particularly interesting and unique? Does anybody want to go?
I can maybe start because it kind of goes with what you said, Alfred, earlier on what you can contribute to the group. And I say this a lot that I learn just as much from the people on this panel and my classmates as I do in the classroom. And it's because of like everyone's diverse experiences. So I think like maybe my X factor was just how passionate and my ability to showcase like my work and why my background connected to why I'm here in the climate space maybe just because climate was always around me, especially this climate justice lens. I had it from a very early age because of my experience growing up and where I grew up. But I learned what the systemic causes of that when I developed my sustainability kind of professional lens and the academic lens that I was able to provide. So being able to talk about kind of what I had been experiencing my whole life and my passion of where it started to actually my being a practitioner in the field, that might have been my X factor, maybe. That's a great question though. Yeah.
I was gonna add on to that, Gabby. I feel like honestly, like everyone's X factor in the program is their passion for it. I think like Alfred emphasized at the beginning, like there is no cookie cutter applicant, like a certain GPA or a certain GRE score is not what's gonna get you into the program. Because I think they really try to create a community of people who just care. Like not everyone is applying to this program because not everybody cares about it. And that's like a great thing. They want people who are truly passionate about it and are going to contribute to this growing industry and growing issue. So I think it's just really important to showcase like why why you care, like, and that's the most important thing you can show in your statement of purpose, no matter how you show it, like with your work experience, with your school experience, with your extracurriculars, like no matter what it is. They just want people who can add value to the industry and the program as it grows. So
I think I'll jump in here. I think as Alfred has highlighted before, we have a diverse cohort. So the ability to like, how can you insert yourself? So the fact that I could prove from my background, from my upbringing, up to my career progression, all the way, that this is something that is very important to me. I feel like that's what, you know, uh, sold me here. So I feel like just be authentic. Your authenticity will get you in the program. You do not have to copy and paste. So everyone on this panel, and even 120, over 120 of us in the class, have really diverse backgrounds. So there is no chasang in the class in terms of like the kind of experience that you bring to the program. So the ability to just articulate your key strands, your backgrounds, your experiences, I think will give the X factor.
I don't know if there's anything I would say that would be different from my three co-panelists here. I think, yeah, everyone brings a unique perspective. Everyone brings unique background, globally, domestically, what have you. And I think, really, I mean, everyone, I think as you're applying, really lean into what it is that brings you into the climate space, what it is that brings you into further graduate study. I think in there you find what then sort of forms your X factor as you apply and sort of carries you through.
Excellent.
Alfred, there's a question that like goes right with this, and
Please
it's
do
like,
take it, Gabby.
okay, it's like the narrative of the statement of purpose rather than like answering the questions. And I think that kind of goes with like what we were saying. It is more of a narrative, but you do want to answer the question. So it's like not the 1, 2, 3 more short answer. We want a story. And if you make this presentation of how your experience connects to your fit for the program, that is the narrative to tell. And so the tone of that, it's very subjective to who's writing it, I think, and that's where the diversity comes in, of the cohort, because there is no right answer or like specific type of essay they're looking for. But I think the narrative part and how you shape it to answer the questions, like think of it like that.
Yeah, I will add quickly to what Gabby mentioned. One of the biggest things that when I was writing my first draft of my statement of purpose, and I shared the prompt and I shared my response with the folks who were close to me that were reviewing it, one of the biggest critiques that consistently came back in that first draft was, you're not answering the questions. Because it's very easy, and this applies to people who are trying to get their applications done as quickly as possible, or those who are applying to a dozen different schools, all with a little bit different prompts. It's very easy to say, here is a generic statement of purpose that talks about me, talks about my experience, talks about why I'll benefit from graduate school. If you put that into the prompt that we have here, either the MA prompt or the MS prompt for Columbia Climate School, you're not giving yourself a very good shot at a good statement of purpose, because the key thing, as Gabby mentioned, we want a story that's sort of told throughout the response, but that story should pretty directly answer the questions we ask, right? What are your, what brings you to the climate space? And I'm paraphrasing here, and what core course you might be excited for, what advanced certificate you might be excited for, things like that. We want to see that evidenced in your response, and we want to see that woven together as part of your story, be that from an experience you may have had to your undergraduate, to a work experience, to now, right? Wherever that may take you. It is critical that, to answer that question, that it addresses both, that it's a narrative that tells something, but also that it pretty directly answers the questions that we're asking, because that's how the admissions committee is going to really look at your response and gauge, if you have what it takes and what you would bring to our cohort here.
Maybe I can jump in there and say that at some point, because brainstorming that takes the most time, at some point when my friend was reviewing my statement of purpose, she was like, how come you've not put in this this project, or highlighted the aspects of this project that you really aced? And at that point I had to do a trade-off, because I had thought I've put in the best experience. So in many instances you'd have to cut off. If you are someone who's had like over 5 years of experience, you can't fit into like the statement of purpose, a 2-page or like a 1,000 word statement of purpose. So I think you just need to be very consistent and like be very clear if you're interested in, say, food. Because for me, I've touched on food, I've done volunteer work doing plastics, but again, I can't fit that all in one. So just be very clear and be very consistent. You don't have to be all over the place. And as Gabby had said, they don't know you. You can paint yourself the best way you can. So yeah, I think consistency will help.
Well, I got a question in the Q&A. I feel so cool. So it says, as someone that's a senior year, in their senior year of undergraduate degree, how did you manage to focus or narrow down experience that does not have strong professional and academic foundations in climate change? That's a hard question, but I don't know. I feel like I definitely put a lot of thought into like my resume and everything and what I wanted to showcase, because I tried to keep my resume to one page. So then I was like, what the most strongly shows that I would succeed in grad school at Columbia, in the climate school specifically. So like I did have some extracurricular and leadership experience in kind of the sustainability realm, but then I had others that weren't. I think that everything you've done in the past has a purpose. You did it for a reason. And even if it's not specifically climate related or what you want to do in the future, can contribute to why you would be a good candidate for grad school or for the climate school. So I don't know. This is a little bit of a tricky question. Obviously, like, experience in this field is important, but there's people who come into this program who don't really have experience in climate. Like, for example, someone came in with like production and media background, or there's people who come with STEM versus non-STEM. So like, once again, it's not like a cookie cutter person who's in the program. So I think that as long as you show experience, like doing things that you're passionate about, or things that interest you, like that's not harmful, even if it's not directly climate related. For example, like I was on the executive board of my sorority and I was the VP of internal affairs. So I oversaw an academic excellence director and I oversaw a member engagement director, and then also a ritual and history director. That really doesn't have anything to do with climate, but at the same time, it gave me a lot of experience, like working with big groups of people, overseeing people underneath me, even though it wasn't in a professional setting or even an academic setting. I oversaw people who were younger than me and making a big impact on a 270 person chapter. And it gave me like real world experience, like navigating risk and just navigating like almost like public speaking and dealing with like big issues. That's a simple way to put it. But so yeah, I felt like it really contributed. And then what I want to do, I want to engage with people and teach them about climate and um just like work on in sports and events, like work on fan engagement or just overall like outreach. And so even though it wasn't climate specifically related, it still lends to my ability to do that in the future with climate and sustainability topics. So I think like anything that you think shaped you the most and was the most valuable to you, even if it isn't climate related, is worth including.
Thanks, Peyton. And I'll just say we do have students that also pivot, and in fact, it's interesting because I actually think the panelists that we have today are students that were engaged in it academically, have overlaps in their professional careers in the climate space. So we can't, that can't be argued. That's a fact with the audience or the panelists that we have, but not everybody in the learning community necessarily are coming to this with like a ingrained sustainability lens or an ingrained energy transition lens. Some students are coming to this as pivots, I have a communication background. I was a business journalist, and now I'm pivoting and I want to cover business with a climate lens, for example. So I don't want anybody coming away from this session thinking you have to have some really robust climate background to be compelling. We are interested in more students coming into the climate space. So we have to welcome those who are pivots, and you have a lot to lend. So I just want to emphasize that as well. And then there was a question, and Damaris did such a good job of saying, hey, listen, we have another session where we will be covering this, which is about, kind of the learning community itself and careers. But out of curiosity, just because I have the panel now, and this will be like maybe the last question, can you speak to the blend of students in your cohort and kind of the diversity and how that's additive to you? That's just really broad and not necessarily related to the application process, but I think might give our prospective students understanding of the value of the X factor. Can you speak to that and how that's valuable?
I'm happy to kick off here. I think our cohort is 126 students currently in the MA Climate Society program. Of that group, I'm just trying to remember the statistics that have been provided to us many a times. 55% are domestic students, around 45% are international students. I think over half have some sort of social science background, and then the remaining under half has a mix of a majority of those are natural science, a few engineers, a few folks in arts, communications, marketing, things like that. We have a handful of students who come directly from their undergraduate, a handful who have been in the workspace for 10 plus years and are coming back for either a career advancement or career shift. I think the average age, Alfred, is it 26? I think is the average age.
26. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. So the average age is 26. So if we were to pull like a single candidate out of the pool, chances are they would have graduated the university a few years ago and worked for a little bit or done some other study prior to coming to the Columbia Climate School. And topic wise, if you look at the things that folks are interested, it goes all over the map. I know people who are interested in sustainability in a specific industry, sustainability in like an ESG corporate context. Some people who are looking at climate justice, food systems, disaster management, renewable energy, energy and climate policy, energy and climate finance. And you get chances, actually, interestingly enough, to study all of those things. And so in the classes that you're in, be it the core courses or the electives, you will more often than not have people who are new to that area of climate and sustainability and energy who are studying it for the first time, and some people who are very well seasoned or experts in that space. So it's always a really interesting dynamic in any course to see people who are well adjusted to a certain field and people who are new to a field sort of coming together, sharing knowledge amongst each other, learning from each other. But broadly across the cohort, it's a really, really interesting mix. I think that's what makes it so cool. Is that, as has been mentioned plenty of times, we don't have a cookie cutter application. We don't have a cookie cutter applicant or candidate. It's very sort of big tent catch-all here at the climate school. And the folks that we take up and the folks that we work with and that we study alongside all really hail from different backgrounds. That's what really makes it so unique.
Excellent. And then I'm just because a question did come in that was good. And I feel like just to put people's minds at ease, somebody said if they have a non-STEM background and how they tackle dynamics. And I'm seeing both Gabby and Peyton came off mic. Maybe Gabby, you want to go first and then let Peyton, I don't know if you guys want to just talk about how you navigated it.
So can you guys hear me? I keep checking just because coffee shop, but I am definitely more on the social science side. I think, we are all scientists in a way, but the STEM background, from like engineering and being amazing at equations and having a strong economics background, I understood conceptually what stuff was, but I have never, worked heavily on that side, on the technical side in the field. We more so I would learn and outsource that, but by myself, it was definitely a challenge. And I was challenged in the dynamics courses, and I'll let you know about the quant course because we're taking that next semester. But as far as the dynamics course, I think the resources provided, definitely take advantage of those. And for example, Rishabh, who has extensive experience and is really great at quant and who was comfortable with dynamics. That is why we have a diverse cohort, because you will become friends with them and you will make great friends with people who do have experience. And they, other than the professors who are available and the TAs who are super helpful and awesome, we have this saying of never do a problem set alone. It's never eat alone. It's never do a problem set alone. Because I think the collaboration and being able to not copy work from each other necessarily at all, but it's working together and having support from both sides, people who are learning to people who are more so masters of the subject. And so yeah, I would say to rest your mind. It is hard. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's not challenging. It's challenging, but you also feel really great when you get it right and you understand it. And you're not here to be perfect at everything. And I think that that's what you come to this program to do, is to really put your effort and energy into your strengths, and then use the skills along the way that you're going to acquire and just move with that. So don't stress too much course by course that you have to master it and be great. You're set up to succeed. And just know that.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I responded in the Q&A in case we didn't get to it. But I didn't have a STEM background and I was nervous, and it's hard. Like Gabby said, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It is difficult, but it's also supposed to be. So you're not being set up to fail. Like, you're supposed to learn through this. And once again, you won't be perfect at it. Like, I am far from it. But at the same time, like, that's why you're in a diverse cohort, to learn from others, to learn from your professors, to learn from your TAs, and um, they're there to help you and support you. And I found it manageable, and I even enjoyed our last project. So
I will close off this by saying, is it not beautiful to be in spaces where you get to learn more as opposed to, like, giving? And I think that's what I've felt in, like, and especially the dynamics class. There are people, like we've said, Rishabh, who have more experience in the field and they get to share more. And so most of the time, even in some other electives, which I don't have experience in, I get to be wowed, and I'm just like, wow, people have this knowledge. So I end up leaving such spaces, such classes, feeling so fulfilled. And so, and I think that is what I believe you guys will feel when you go into those spaces. And the second thing is the support you get. You get to have office hours, go there, and, like, sometimes they give you that personal touch. You get attended to and answered to the questions that you have on a personal level. The support is what helps you, and that's what has pushed most of us. And I think most of us, even on this panel, have done well despite not having the background. So I think you guys will ace it. No struggle.
Well, that brings us, we've gone 16 minutes over time. So I want to say huge thank you to our panelists, Peyton, Rishabh, Chesang, and Gabby. Thank you guys so much for, again, lending your voices and sharing your perspectives. You do this all the time, obviously, but truly, I think this session is one that many of our prospective students really look forward to. So I want to say a sincere thank you. Damaris Diaz has highlighted in the chat box. We do have a couple more upcoming info sessions that we really strongly encourage you to attend. In fact, the next one is anybody joining us today that wants MA Climate and Society info session. We will have a session dedicated for that next week, and the program director, Dr. Lisa Dale, will be participating as well. And then we have a couple other additional opportunities. So I just want to say a huge thank you to our students, and best of luck to everybody. And we sincerely look forward to seeing your application. All right, have a good one. Take care, everyone. Bye.